fam, there's a pretty good chance that you won't. You probably won't even know when she's ovulating, but she's gonna give some time to the guy that is going to make her as interested as possible during that period of time. And I know it sounds like bull, and I know it sounds like I'm just chatting a bunch of shit, but the truth of it is,
the royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man whose sickness for the thickness prevents him from skinny dipping. He is also a man who may include jumping to conclusions to his cardio routine. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B, and I am here to speak on greatness. And yes, I know, as a topic it sounds very boring, but I do think that what I'm about to say seems particularly interesting. And considering that there is going to be some greatness in there, or at least I will be discussing quite a bit of greatness on the main topic, I do want to at least highlight the other thing that greatness comes with, which is eccentricism, or the act of being eccentric. So I intend on going off the rails all in a bit to show that eccentricism is something that makes great people great. And while I do believe that I am the greatest that's ever been there, either way, like a little bit of eccentricism is fun. Or maybe it's just my excuse to go off the rails a little bit, because it has been a minute since I decided to just go off. So I might as well do that. And as I go off, I will at least be teaching you something particularly interesting about the act of being great, or getting to the level of worldwide acclaim and what that might cost you. And should you want to listen to that and find out what it is, you probably should go all the way till the end. And should you like the episode, should you not like it, should you have a different form of feedback, or should you want to suggest a potential topic for me to discuss, then the social media links are usually in the description below. The DMs are always open, and I would be more than happy to read your messages or get them and handle them accordingly. Now, I do need to get the show on the road because there is greatness at hand and there is greatness waiting for me in the main topic. But before I can do that, I want to kick things off by addressing something that I find to be particularly interesting, and that something is women. Of course, I find women interesting. I talk about them all the time. But there is something that I find to be very interesting with them, and it is the fact that they not only not keep their word in a lot of instances, but they don't live up to their own word to themselves. Like, some of the shit that they say just does not really live up to the reality that they're living. And I do have an example of this, because it's not like I'm just talking shit out of my ass. I would want to at least mention an instance where something like that is the case before I can give my thoughts and, explain exactly why this is absolute bull. And my exhibit comes from the Control Z tribe, or Control Z for those of y'all that have seen them on IG or on YouTube, and women led and just Kenyan vibes all around. Now, during an episode that they had on YouTube not too long ago, they were busy talking about a couple of things relating to women, whereby 3 women on some version of a podcast episode were busy discussing something, and one of those ladies spoke on how apparently if the guy can't handle you on your period, he doesn't deserve you during your ovulation. Now, all of the women agreed, but I have my thoughts on it. Although before I can say anything in regards to that, I first need to let the clip play, because this was the clip that was posted on IG. And then once it's played, I can give my thoughts on it, because I'm about to point out a bunch of bull. So without further ado,
if you can't handle her on her period, you don't deserve her on ovulation. Wapi makofi.
Facts.
My nigga, don't ever get close to me if you're never there on my period.
Handling a woman on her period, see a task for the week.
True.
So if you can stick around for that, when I'm ovulating, I will remember you. Unakumbuka Jesus akiwa pale kwa cross akiambia yule today I will remain in my kingdom. Sasa when I get to paradise hapa ni ovulation. Naenda kushop for my thongiest thong.
I guess you have lingerie.
Lingerie wapi? Nakuja na trench coat na heels. Nasema hello.
Bucket list.
Uko ready?
okay, so I forgot to add, that is from the series that they do called Girl Unfiltered, where it's like 3 ladies, or I think it's 2, busy sitting down and discussing girl matters on YouTube. And this is still under the Control Z YouTube channel. And okay, now that I've described all of that, I do need to get to my thoughts on it, of which, by the way, I even forgot to mention. My voice isn't at its 100% because I'm having a bit of a throat issue, but for those of y'all that probably liked the voice, because apparently there's some women that like it when I have a cold, because apparently I sound better to them. But all in all, yeah, that's why my voice may not sound like it normally does. Although I do hope that it still sounds as close to what I normally sound as possible. But anyways, all that said and done. Now, my thoughts on the entire thing. Okay, she came out, or at least these babes came out and they were like, oh, if you can't handle her on a period, then you don't deserve her when she's ovulating. Now, do I think that this is true? I think that that's what they'd like to think. Personally speaking, that's what I think they'd like to think, because I honestly believe that this is a stack of bull. Now, don't get me wrong. If you are married or if you are in a relationship, then this does carry some sense, because you need to be there for your person. And, that doesn't mean that you're only there for them when stuff is good, regardless of gender. And if a baby is having a period, especially if she has very bad cramps, then it's good to be there for her, because you are a caring partner and you will be showing care to her. So if you're doing that when she's on her period, then of course when she's ovulating, then she'll appreciate you a little bit more. Granted, if she's in a relationship and she is faithful, that appreciation is gonna be paid one way or another. Of which one way or another is the exact same way that we know it, which is pussy. But with that said, if you are a single individual and you're trying to holler at a shorty and she's like, if you can't handle me on my period, then you don't deserve me when I'm ovulating, fam, don't even bother yourself with that shit. She's probably saying that shit so that you can be a little bit more caring to her, but in reality, it really doesn't matter, because you know what? Fine, yes, she could be saying a bunch of that shit, but more often than not, when a shorty is ovulating, the next guy that's interested, that is the closest proximity to her, is probably going to be the guy that gets it. Like, babes out here like talking about how, men don't usually marry the women they love, they marry the woman that's available to marry when they are ready to marry, blah blah. But I kid you the fuck not, ovulation does wonders to women. It makes them so horny that they're willing to give it up to the guy that, manages to ruffle their feathers well enough and nicely enough during the time of their ovulation. So, you thinking that you're going to be a good caring dude just because, she's on her period and you'll most probably get some when she's ovulating, fam, there's a pretty good chance that you won't. You probably won't even know when she's ovulating, but she's gonna give some time to the guy that is going to make her as interested as possible during that period of time. And I know it sounds like bull, and I know it sounds like I'm just chatting a bunch of shit, but the truth of it is, you being nice to a babe because you want to hit it is one of the worst strategies that you can ever really take, by the way. Like, if you're going to be nice to a shorty, be nice to her because you're a nice person. If you're going to be good to her, be there, or at least be good to her because you are a good person. Don't do it because you're trying to get some ass, because I kid you the hell not. If you're trying to be nice to a shorty just to get some ass, there's a pretty good chance that if you'll get it, you probably won't get it as good or as much as the guy who isn't instinctively nice. You need to be more authentic to yourself and then see if that's what's going to get you there, because kid you the hell not, I have seen dudes go out of their way, try to be super nice and everything, and as a baby's like, oh, thank you so much, you're the sweetest, there's another guy that's hitting it from the back. Not necessarily as it's happening, but it does kind of end up happening. So when you see yourself in that position where you feel like you need to be nice to her because she's on her period, because you're trying to hit, remind yourself of this. When she is on her period, she wants to be treated like a small child. So she wants that care, and when she throws tantrums, she wants someone to understand that, she's really going through it and she's suffering. But she still deserves, all of that care and affection. But when she's ovulating, she wants to be fucked like a porn star, which is disrespectfully. So once you realize the amount of range between those two individuals, you will now start to realize that what you need to be when she's on her period is very different from what you need to be when she's ovulating. So you choose the one that you're most comfortable being, and you stick to that shit. But all in all, always be authentic to yourself. Do not try to be something or someone else just because you're trying to get pussy or just because you're trying to get a babe. And with that said, I should probably move on to the main topic of this episode because shit, I legit felt myself flying off the rails for a little bit. And anyways, let me move things on. Now, not too long ago, while I was on TikTok, I stumbled across a particularly interesting video which kind of hit me for a little bit, but at some point I ended up having to come around to understanding what it was that was being said. It was someone who was busy talking about how great men have always made for shit partners. Okay, not necessarily like that, but the way she began the video was basically her saying that she realized that all the great men have been terrible husbands. Now, does that mean shit partners? Not necessarily, but I wasn't in agreement with all of this, and I was like, you know what? This baby's chatting a bunch of shit, and I have to make sure I address this on the podcast because if this is reaching out to many people on TikTok, I need to be able to disprove this shit. So I'm gonna let the video play, then I can get into my thoughts on the entire thing. So without further ado,
all the greatest men that I know are terrible husbands. I am terrified of marriage, and this is just one of the reasons why. I've just been reading Ngugi wa Thiong'o for class, a man whose work I admire immensely and that has been pivotal to my own understanding of freedom and what it looks like for the individual. He had a great mind, and that great man beat his wife. In my own life, I have seen brilliant women wither in marriages to great men. The greatness, as it were, serves to erase the suffering and pain in the home. The burden of a successful marriage seems to be on the wife. It is her endurance that is critical to a marriage's vitality. From a Christian background, it is only women I see who are taught to accept things like infidelity, verbal abuse, and even physical abuse as outside attacks on the marriage by the devil. They must pray for their marriage, fast for it, or learn how to not provoke. The greater the husband is, the more intense the expectation to suffer, to endure. I refuse to live a life of endurance, and so one of the things that I have been seriously contemplating since I was about 11 or 12 years old is if I will ever get married. The older that I've gotten, the more the answer has shaped up to be no. It is an answer that terrifies me. It is something that I've been trying to deconstruct. I do have to get back to my readings, but I just wanted to put that introduction out there so that I remember to get back to it.
Okay, pretty interesting sentiments that she's put down. And okay, I'll be very honest. When it comes to the whole talk of like her growing up and, you know, the whole idea of whether she'd want to get married, and the older she's gotten, the less she's wanted it. Now, I don't know the babe's age, so I can't say for sure if she's hit, you know, like a certain age where people don't want to marry as much, of which I know for a lot of modern women nowadays, it's like the moment they start crossing their 30s, the idea of getting married just doesn't seem like that great of an idea. But anyways, that's besides the point. Also, like her decision to marry or not to get married, I feel like is something that I've spoken about before. The idea of millennials not getting as enticed, or at least later stage millennials and Gen Zs aren't being enticed well enough with the idea of marriage. Like, the more people are hearing about the stuff that goes on in marriages, the less people want to get married, and it's something that I've spoken about multiple times before. And that isn't really what I'm trying to get into on this episode. It's actually the fact that she was talking about how all the great men that she knows are terrible husbands. And when I was looking at the comments, like, there were a lot of women that were actually agreeing with what Shorty was saying. You know, busy talking about how Steve Biko cheated on his wife, Ngugi wa Thiong'o beat his wife to within an inch of her life, Albert Einstein, his wife was the genius, not him, or some shit like that, which I can't entirely say is true or not true. But like, you look at a number of these instances, and minus a bunch of the feminism and patriarchy talk, a couple of women have also come to this realization. But it's more so this whole idea that the patriarchy is the reason behind this. And can I say that it's really the patriarchy? No, not really. But what I can say for a fact is that she's right. Much as I'd hate to admit it, much as the thought of admitting that this babe is actually speaking the truth about, you know, the great men that we've known as a people, you know, being terrible husbands, is an unfortunate reality that I have to accept. Because the truth of it is, like, when you look at a lot of these so-called great men, there's a lot of them that don't have particularly good looking skeletons once you open up the closet. Now, don't get me wrong, Keanu Reeves is a bold example of how that isn't entirely right. And if anything, like, much as we don't know about him having a wife or kids, like, that guy is known as like the golden child that every person wishes they had as a friend or as a partner or some shit, because the guy is one of the nicest human beings on the planet. But aside from him, the largest part of great men, the largest part of great people in society, or even throughout history, aren't particularly great as partners. Like, you listen to the stories of what their partners went through, of how they treated their children even. Like, they weren't particularly great to the people closest to them. But, even with that said, there are a couple of outliers. You look at people like Tony Robbins, you could argue whether he is a great man or not. But dude has, at least from what I can see, a particularly successful life, and he has a happy marriage, and I guess he also has kids and shit. Like, you have a couple of examples here and there. And people have tried to talk about the whole work-life balance thing, but there are a couple of outliers that will exist as great men who are also great family men and great partners. So, like, it is something that I believe, in as much as it does sound very sucky, there are some outliers that exist, but for the most part, it's very, very hard to get actual outliers. Even though someone was to bring up instances of, like, for example, Barack and Michelle Obama, or Beyonce and Jay-Z, like, those ones are very questionable, because when you look at, Barack Obama and Michelle Obama talks about how she hated the guy during his years in the White House. And if anything, I feel like those guys are so PR prepped that if they're going to release anything that is going to sound negative about their union, they probably have a PR team that has been working round the clock to make sure that it either drives a narrative or they're using it to sell a book or some shit. So those guys are incredibly well PR prepped. Same thing with Jay-Z and Beyonce. People would bring up the whole Becky with a good hair thing from the Lemonade album, but the Lemonade album was written by like 71 songwriters. So you can't entirely say that there's like full-on truth there. But there's other instances of people claiming that Jay-Z cheated. There's the whole Diddy Files thing. But I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't be surprised if, on the low, Beyonce's had a couple of NDAs with a couple of niggas here and there. So for the most part, not unless if you're getting into hearsay, you really can't say for sure that someone who is considered to be great, quote unquote, as far as, a majority of society is concerned, has really had a very, very good story of, having a great relationship with their partner. Most of them are in good. But in saying all of this, I think people forget one thing. In all of this that people can say about, great men made for terrible husbands, on the flip side, also great women made for terrible wives. Like, look at every single woman that is considered great, and there's a 99% chance that either she is single, she is divorced, or she just does not have a rep as far as being a good partner. Like, you look at, let's say, for example, Wangari Maathai, Nobel Peace Prize laureate, passed a couple of years ago. She wasn't married last I checked. People can talk about, for example, Oprah Winfrey, not a married woman. She decided not to get married. She decided to stick on, dating Mr. Stedman last I checked. And she isn't a particularly married woman. She can claim that she has a partnership, but, minus a couple of photos here and there, we don't really know much about whether she does have a partner or not. You look at many other women just across history that have, a particularly good rep, and they didn't make for particularly great wives. So it's not that it's something that affects men. This is something that affects people across the board the moment you get to the status or the level where you are considered a great person for humanity. Like, there's always going to be a sacrifice when you're chasing a certain level of success and gain and greatness, whereby the people closest to you are either going to be sacrificed or are going to have to sacrifice just for your greatness to actually become a thing. And regardless of name, regardless of how well known or how high up they are, when you look at most cases of people that are considered great, by some of the things that they accomplished, there's usually a very, very high chance that they are a terrible partner or just not anyone's partner at all. Because even when you look at someone like, for example, Steve Jobs is an iconic individual, all right? But if you talk about his family life, it is an absolute opposite of the greatness that people speak of him about. When you look at Elon Musk, the guy, has managed to accomplish quite a number of things. He is considered to be a great human being, whether you're looking at it as far as space travel is concerned, whether you're looking at it as far as electric cars is concerned, whether you're looking at it as far as entrepreneurship and, just being knowledgeable about the shit that you do is concerned. Like, the guy really does tick quite a lot of boxes. But the guy hasn't made for a great partner. And if you need proof, all you need to do is just look at all of the past people that he's had children with. From the very first woman that he had married all the way to the latest one, if he has one. Like, he's been involved with multiple different women and he sired multiple children, and it's not like those women are all with him as of right now. Maybe say for the last woman that he had kids with. So the issue itself isn't that he is a shit partner because he's a man. He's a shit partner because he's great. And I think that's essentially what I'm trying to drive, regardless of gender. Like, if you are someone that is chasing a certain level of greatness or is achieving a certain level of greatness, there's a very high likelihood that you'll be a shit partner. And I think this is something that happens across the board regardless of gender. And it's not that they are bad people. I think it's just the elements and the qualities that you notice with a lot of them that may make them great are the same exact qualities that make them to be shit partners. And there's certain things that you'll kind of notice. So, like, for example, you'll notice that such people are, one, aggressive and uncompromising. And they do that, like, for them, that's who they are, and that's what allows them to achieve so much. And guess what? Like, it makes for a great person when you achieve a bunch of shit, but it makes for a very shit partner when you are uncompromising and you are just aggressive the entire time. Because it's not like it's a switch on, switch off type situation. They are always like that. Then also, they tend to have an unshakable drive, which usually affects how they live and relate with others. And when you have a situation like that, like for example, when you look at someone like Elon Musk, he spaces his time out into blocks of 5 minutes, and the guy is working full days, sometimes sleeping in the factory, multiple times, by the way, sleeping in the factory. And you realize that the guy doesn't live the same life that most other people will live. The guy is chasing greatness, but he is living a completely different kind of life from the normal person. Then you realize that some of those people tend to have very weird quirks and beliefs, which make for very, very interesting things to talk about, but can make them very weird as a partner. So, like, for example, you look at someone like Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was someone who did not believe in showering as much because he felt that his fruit and vegetarian diet made him immune to, like, disease and body odor. Yet the guy used to smell, so he wouldn't shower for days. The guy was also particularly well known for coitus interruptus, aka not finishing when you're doing the job in the bedroom. And he felt that, if you come, you're basically losing creativity and drive, which he didn't want to lose because he was trying to build something great, which is Apple. And the guy's behind the iPhone, but imagine trying to have a kid with someone like that. Like, you think of someone like that, you look at an example like Elon Musk, who has this belief that, okay, granted, it is true that we are having a bit of a population crisis, and the guy's answer to it is populating the world with many of his babies and many women. That's a wild thing. And all of these are people that I'm just coming up with right now off the top of my head. Like, the more names you bring up, the more you dig into the sort of great person and how they were as like a friend and a partner, the more you realize that these guys were just shit individuals, and a lot of the things that made them great people did make them shit partners. And it's not that they're bad people, they're just shit individuals to date. So if you are considering dating and or marrying a great person, it is one of those things that you have to accept. Regardless of whether these people are like the greatness that are this kind of outlier, like the Musks and the Steve Jobs and so on, even though it's not that, sometimes it's just someone who's very successful, for example, in business, very successful in tech, or in just any other field, you have to realize that there's going to be some level of sacrifice from your end. Either that, or you're the person that is super successful, or is chasing that top level, and now at that point your partner, your potential partner or current partner, is the one that will be having to sacrifice, because they won't get the full version of you that they would want to be with, because that's extra hours in the office, that's trying to meet with people and interacting with different people, even during times when you'd want to have personal time. That's not caring about them as much because you're too busy focusing on building some extraordinary shit. Like, it's always going to be a sacrifice, because you may not be able to spend time with your family or friends. Yes, you're chasing greatness and it's amazing, but you're going to cut back a bunch of the time that you'd spend with family and friends, and that might make you a fairly shit partner to be with, because when that person needs you, when your partner wants to be with you, needs you, wants to spend time with you, and you're just focusing on work or building some extraordinary shit, it quickly stops feeling as good to the person that you're with, and it now starts to feel like a bunch of neglect. So to kind of conclude all of this, all I'm trying to say is, if you're trying to be with or be a great person, then go ahead. I won't stop you, it's entirely up to you. But as you do that, just remember, there's going to be a bunch of sacrifice. Whether it's from you as the great person, or from your partner because they are a great person, or from you because you have a partner who's a great person. Point is, there's going to be sacrifice, and it usually affects the people that are closest in proximity to the very great person way more than it affects everyone else, which is why they love them, but you might not feel the same. So if you're comfortable doing that, then go ahead. But if you're not comfortable with it, then clearly you know very well greatness is good, but if you want a good partner, or at least if you want a great partner, then maybe you might have to take a bit of a compromise down that route. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know what the hell I'm saying. Maybe I'm looking at things from the wrong colored glasses, and maybe I need to look at things from a different angle. Either way, I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the Breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the Breaktime Podcast. On X, it is at Bagaka the D. And on Bluesky, it is at the BreaktimePod.bsky.social. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.